Can I come on, can I go outside?
This is not being
Yeah. I think,
He's sort of being a jerk because he's not being honest. He's saying, this isn't, you should do something.
It's okay, we have photos of
I
it.
can't guarantee
Sure.
that this is going to work for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
He's not giving her a realistic time frame. It's all week to week.
Yeah, it's fine. We should be able to keep it. I could go see if they have another.
Yeah,
That's okay.
this is a lot easier to read. That's okay.
Here it is. Everything goes in my head. This morning, I pair of socks that I didn't need yesterday.
Hopefully this is gonna, because we tried the chalkboard thing, but I don't know if it'll work out. We're doing multiple things. It's not because it's just for show.
Okay, and I'm gonna copy something and I will be right back.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, this is.
So we're gonna ask for your help. We're not necessarily the best at names, but we want to be able to call
You know, what I can see right big, we probably won't be able to see them anyway, the sunlight coming, at least in here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Of course.
Where's the camera?
Oh.
So.
Oh, that's, thank you. Oh, yeah.
Do you like share the stream link on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Mm-hmm.
We're students.
Mm-hmm.
It's one sheet that
You need more chairs? Hey, how are you doing? Yeah, I think so.
should we get going, or do you want to see what other people come?
I think we can get going.
Hi, everyone. Can you speak? Here, you can hear me? Yeah. For about 9 years. No, I love mediating. What do you guys ever done? Outside of what we're going to present for you today, is I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of how mediation works. That's the way that we practice it. I am in private practice as a mediator, and I also teach. I teach the conflict, the sociology of conflict, and I also teach a mediation and negotiation workshop at John Jay College. So that's what I do in my own time.
And hi, I'm Carol Liebman. I'm a clinical professor at Columbia Law School. The clinical part of the professor part, my students go out and work on legal cases. And I established a mediation clinic when I came to Columbia. I've been on a legal aid clinic in Boston College for many years.
So that means
Before I came to New York in the early 90s. And I have taught mediation in Vietnam, China, Israel, Brazil, to parents, to kids, high school kids, to lawyers, even some judges at firms to teach. And mediated everything from parent-child cases to complex multi-party cases, including a couple of education institution disputes. And so I teach mediation and negotiation. And we are being taped, that is, right?
Yeah.
It's okay, I just want to know. So, So is this taping and we're being taped and to the stream?
Yeah. When you say teach mediation, or do you mean that you teach how to mediate, or you're teaching the like active role of mediation? Like actually teaching about it, or actually doing it?
So as a clinical teacher, I think that the old saying, tell me how to fish, I forget, show me how to fish, I remember, let me fish, I can feed myself for life. So I'm the let me fish. So I teach the theory of mediation and actually teach negotiation as well. We put things in clinics so the students, it's like practice. The students go out and, under my supervision, mediate real cases.
And full disclosure, Carol was my teacher. So that's how I know her.
Also, have you mediated students in conflict?
You talked about what your experience dealing with educational conflicts, and then can you talk about what you did as a student?
Let's go what we were thinking about for the agenda. Your question about do we teach about mediation or have people do mediation, Sarah, was a really good one because our experience is talking about it and describing what we do doesn't really communicate it. So our plan, always, because mediation is a very flexible procedure and we try to model in our teaching how we mediate, our plan had been to do a couple of interactive exercises, present a very brief bit of theory, but really do one interactive exercise to give you a sense of what we do in mediation. Is actually an exercise I don't think I've done any presentation without starting with it. It actually involves just sitting in the center and choose some of this exercise and opportunity to get evidence. But to do this exercise and then to do a demonstration of mediation, kind of talk through the process as Bathabile mediates a case. And then I think look at that gives better context. So let's
And if you have questions still after that, then we'd be happy to answer that. And hope that most of your questions are answered in the process and participate.
Yeah, but then, I mean, the kind of formula of the optimal, I think those are me, kind of same process. So, as I said, get started. Do an exercise. This exercise requires you each to get a partner. So pair if somebody's sitting next to you. Everybody have a partner. Get your partners. If you don't have a partner, raise your hand. Who needs a partner? Everybody have a partner. No partner, no hands. All right. This one is a little tricky. You often have arms and tables. So face your partner. And the next thing I need you to do is use somebody's knee as if it were the table. Put your hands in the most important rule of this game, no talking from here on. Okay? No talking. Put your elbow on your leg. Put your palm together. Take your partner's hand. Okay? When I say go, you get an M&M every time the back of your partner's hand hits the tracker plane of what would be a table. Okay? You got 20 seconds. Ready, set, go. Let's do it. Okay, time up. All right. So let's post the results up here. You guys hold on for a second. Results. Three.
Time. Then one here.
Zero.
Zero.
All right, so here's my question.
I just didn't want
Zero zeros. What on it?
I'll grab the
You don't work M&Ms or you don't like M&Ms? All right, so what happened?
and then we ran out of time.
We're gonna have time.
I would just say that, I think from my perspective, I don't think it was the height that was the issue, all of that, and then the factor, I think it was like, neither of us wanted to give up. And like,
To give up, you wanted
Yeah.
to
like,
fight in order to,
wait,
right, and your assumption was, if you're not went down, you would have lost. How about you guys, what was going on?
Made a mistake.
Oh, what was it?
Should have just worked together, get organized. Instead, I just wanted to beat me.
You didn't want to beat you didn't want to lose. And guy, male, female, often you get a really fierce battle. How about some of the others? Same kind of dynamic? What's going on?
I couldn't help not think it was a test of strength. So,
So have any of you ever been in this physical posture before? What does this remind you of?
yes.
I mean, the game. Arm wrestling, right? And when you're in the physical, when you arm wrestle, the object is to win, right? And you win by not letting the other person get your hand down. And you know, all remember when we first beat our uncle or our older sibling or tried to or never did or whatever. But you're in the physical posture where there are social expectations about how to play the game and there are assumptions about winning and losing. What happened with you guys? Okay. 14. Okay. How did you show people what you did? Now, did you talk? Okay, so you broke the rules in order to maximize gain. And also one of the final conflict resolutions is that people approach the game assuming there are a set of rules that you have to play by. And one of the things that we're trying to get people to do is break the kind of conventional expectations, in effect, break the rules in order to get to better solutions and better payoffs. Now, you guys were struggling like crazy, right? And then what happened?
You didn't notice them.
Yeah. And so our hope as mediators is someday somebody will see, maybe even on this streaming feed, will see mediation and the possibilities that will convert the world to having conflict in a different way and having better payoffs. Now, for those of you who had 0 zeros, didn't we have one? I used to just bite this over with my teeth, but then I did this exercise with doctors in the office. So I can't do it anymore. Oh, don't do it if you got 0 zeros or struggle. Oh, this is never done. She didn't learn anything as a student. I did this with 500. I did this exercise one morning at the Plaza Hotel with 500 Bar Association presidents from all over the country. 2 teams got it and cooperated. It was one of the most depressing moments of my life, actually. It was just totally depressing. And the rest just sat there and struggled to kill it for a long time. So this is a powerful force that we're fighting when we're talking about changing the way you think about conflict and thinking about ways to maximize your gain, to get more evidence, have everybody get more. You know, the most efficient way to play this game is to have one person put their hand up like that, but you've got to trust the other, trust whoever lets their hand be put down has to trust that the other side is going to share. So the old trust but verify is to go back and forth. Often people don't speak and they signal, and one of the ways they signal is that the stronger person makes the move of putting their hand down. And then kind of uses his body language to signal that you're cooperating. But it certainly is true that in this game, if you want to signal cooperation, if you put your hand down, you're putting yourself in a more vulnerable position. You're taking some risk. Because once your hand's down, it's hard to get it back up. But somebody has to make a move. Somebody has to signal that's playing differently. I did this, the other point I want to make with this, I can go on for 45 minutes talking about this in debriefing, but move on. But I'm going to tell you, I did this once in Vietnam for a group of 30-ish government officials and young corporate executives. And I had said I wasn't going to teach on this trip because I hadn't been to Vietnam, I hadn't had time to really learn about the culture, I thought it was American, and I think I knew what to do. But I got flattered into teaching. And so I did the same instructions, the same bag that I had. I carried it in a suitcase all the way over. And what happened is the whole two teams got it, cooperated, one team struggled, and everybody else just sat there and held hands. So I think, okay, I was right. It's arrogant of me to think I knew how to teach, or that it's appropriate for me to try to teach use this method. But I went to the mediator, asked questions mode, and said, what's going on? We didn't know what he wanted us to do. Oh, okay, so I said, okay, tell me more about that. Well, we didn't know what he wanted us to do, and we didn't want to get in trouble by doing the wrong thing. Think about the cultural difference that illustrates. Yeah, for the most part in our culture, if you don't know what to do, what's the one way to be sure you get in trouble? Do nothing. In their culture, it's safer to do nothing than to make a mistake. So I think the other piece that we always we won't spend much time on today, maybe, but that culture is always an important piece of what goes on. Differences in culture, differences in styles of communicating, different values can be the source of conflict, and also acknowledging those differences can be the source of resolution. So questions or comments about this? I'm going to pass it around. Take as many as you want, plus as many as you think you're entitled to, based on what you learned from this somewhat humiliating experience. Okay?
So as the items go around, I'm going to take a few moments to talk a little bit more deeply about mediation from this sort of philosophical, theoretical perspective. But also with some concreteness to it as well. We're going to talk about what is actually going on underneath these conflicts from the perspective of mediators. What are we listening for? What can we do? How do we interpret what's going on, and how do we understand conflict? So the first thing I want to talk about is what mediators and conflict resolvers found contribute to how a conflict dispute happens and the content of it. Because every single one is different. And it's informed by a number of things depending on who is involved. So first is the characteristics of the parties involved. So it can matter whether it is about age, whether it is about gender, whether it is about what part of the country you're from. Characteristics of the people involved are really important. The nature of the relationship between people is really important. So often when we think about a conventional negotiation, you've got a material object, or you have a material goal, and so that you have people who are then going to negotiate about that particular object. Well, mediation is concerned not just about the concerns over that object, mediation is also concerned about relationship. And so we will recognize that in the relationships, there's a lot of things that's going on. Are we talking about an evaluative relationship? So, we're talking about a boss and an employee. Are we talking about parent-child? Are we talking about lovers? Are we talking about friends? The relationship between people also really matters, and so we take that into account. Values and culture are really important, as Carol just pointed out. We can't make assumptions about what people's values are or about the culture that informs those values. So we're very interested in finding out what is that all about and having that very clearly inform the discussions that we have. Goals. Goals are really important. When we talk about goals, what is the goal of the material issue that might be what seems to be, what energizes everything, what innovates everything, right? There are other goals that we have, whether we recognize them or not, when we are in conflict. So we've got the goal about the topic. What is the topic of the dispute? What is the dispute really about? And until people really think about what the topic of the dispute is about, often there's this mismatch or this clash where people are talking past each other because they're really not talking about the same thing, but not recognizing that they're not. Or not recognizing that they're in conflict about what the conflict is about to begin with. So we've got this sort of meta thing going. You have goals about relationship. How do you want to be related to? And we may not articulate them. We may not say, I wish you would treat me in this other way, in this interaction. I don't feel like you're treating me with respect. Or, I want to be treated as a creative person who has a brain. Often we can be very patronizing to each other when we are in dispute. And so there is that goal as to how do you want to be treated in the context of the session, the dispute. There are the identity goals. Who are you? And sometimes we will do things in a dispute to protect ourselves, to protect our identities, to save face. And so it's important to acknowledge when one is feeling kind of defensive because you feel that your intrinsic value is being attacked. So that's something that we want to pay attention to as well. And then finally, there are process goals. People will have disputes over how to discuss the thing in the first place. Are we going to talk face-to-face? Are we going to text message? Are we going to email? So there are disputes about that, about those goals too. So what I'm doing here is helping you to understand that from the mediator's perspective, a dispute situation is very nuanced and has a lot of different levels to it. And these are just some of the things that we look at. There's, of course, the nature of the issues that are leading to the conflict. The nature of those issues determine how we respond. There's the social environment that's important. What kind of social environment are we in? Is it one that is really highly structured and formal? Are we allowed to be informal, kind of be ourselves? What are the expectations surrounding that? Then there's the question of audience. And that's really important too. Because often when you're sitting at the table, you're not sitting at the table by yourself. There's a constituency perhaps that is watching. And then there are people who are outside of that who are watching. So their opinions may inform the way that you perform because you're concerned about being judged. So those things inform how we respond to conflict as well. And then finally, consequences. Consequences are really important in how you view the consequences. That informs, of course, how we respond to conflict as well. Now, when it comes to conflict resolution, we also break that down as well. Often there's this sort of simplistic idea that you resolve conflict if you stop the fighting. And my favorite example of that is, you can imagine babysitting and you've got two kids who are fighting, right? The two kids are fighting, hey, we're going back and forth with, whatever your name is, Mauricio. Mauricio, he's bothering me. And the response might be, so stop it. I don't want to hear about it. Stop fighting. There's nothing to be fighting about. Go play with your toys over there. You go play with your toys over there. Stop the fight. So there's an idea that might be, that we resolve the conflict. We go deeper than that. So they're stopping the fighting. They're settling the issues. So let's say one of the kids did take a toy from the other one. Well, give it back. You settle the issue. Or that we can resolve underlying causes. So beyond giving the toy back, we think down to why did the child who took the toy take the toy in the first place? What was going on? What needs did that child have? Is that child without a toy? Did that toy used to be that child and they feel bad about it being taken away from them and given to somebody else? You know, what are the underlying reasons for that child fighting over the toy? So now we've gone a little bit deeper into looking at what's going on in the conflict. After resolving underlying causes, there's an opportunity for forgiveness, perhaps. Right? Let's just come down a layer again, a little bit deeper. An opportunity for forgiveness. And what's interesting about forgiveness, and I love teaching this part in my class, we talk a lot about forgiveness, is that forgiveness does not require the participation of the other person. You can forgive, resolve those underlying issues and forgive in your own heart. And we talk about how that would be important to your own self, peace of mind, and so forth. And then we reach this layer, which is reconciliation. And so there may be, after forgiveness, an opportunity for reconciliation. And we see these levels that I've described to you as being sort of progressive. So we've gone from stopping the fighting to actually getting to the underlying issues, to actually forgiving, to actually reconciling. So these are the opportunities that might exist. So then that comes to the question of what is mediation. So I've given you a little bit of an idea of how mediators think about conflict. How do they think about conflict? It's very complicated in that sense, very layered. So there's a definition of mediation that I'd like to share with you. Mediation is a process in which an impartial third person facilitates negotiation between people in conflict who are trying to make a deal. People in conflict or people who are trying to make a deal. The mediation process empowers them to take control of their lives and find solutions that meet their interests and their needs. It is a private, voluntary, informal process where the mediator or mediators assist the participants to resolve their disputes in a manner acceptable to all. So it's kind of long, it's involved. I'm glad that we had a chance to hand it out to you so you can read it at leisure. It's really packed with a lot of stuff that's really important. One thing being that the mediators are third parties who have no stake in the outcome. It's really important. When Carol and I are mediating, we are not outcome driven. So that even if it comes to a point where you decide this process is not working for us, we are not so attached to the process that we would try to impose our will. We have no stake in the outcome. It's about empowering people to have information, to be able to speak freely without fear of being retaliated against, for exploring, because this is the process of exploration. So we want people to feel free to explore as widely as they'd like to. We can get more into the details of that if there's time. I'm aware that I'm going a little bit slowly, because I want to keep moving. But as you see, there are core principles of mediation are self-determination and party authority, informal decision-making, and confidentiality. Confidentiality is really, really important because, again, we want people to be able to speak freely. And even if people say, oh, yeah, I'm fine with you, I think being public and so forth, it's important that we respect that when you really get down to the table, you don't want to necessarily feel that somebody's sitting there behind you, watching your move and judging you when they are not at the table themselves. So we want to stress that in the mediation process, confidentiality is really important. That doesn't mean that everything has to remain strictly secret. We can make agreements about what is expressed publicly. All the people who are parties to mediation can decide to do that. There are lots of options. Mediation is very flexible. But one of the things that's really important is confidentiality.
And I just wanted to, on the other point of the definition, mediation is a voluntary process. Sometimes mediation is being used more and more by courts. It's not exactly voluntary. The judge says, go talk to those people before you get to see me. But once they go talk to us, they have the choice whether to stay in mediation or end it. So at any point the process isn't working, participants are free to leave. Any agreement that's reached has to be something that's agreeable to the participants, not something that the mediators are imposed on them and said this is what you should do.
So we don't make decisions and we refrain from giving advice for what you should do. You are the experts in that sense, and we are the experts in terms of the process and helping to hold a space wherein the discussions can happen.
And so just a couple of other theories. So what we find is when people are in a dispute, this is the circle of conflict. Our colleague Margaret Shaw actually looked at this for her and got lost here. But people in conflict tend to present the positions I want, who better do, demands, insults, generalities. He always does that. You know, the neighbor is always making, they're always making noise. And sometimes threats, you know, you're going to get it, you're going to be sorry, I'm going to do this or whatever. What mediators are listening for is for something very different. We're listening for the feelings, for the interests, the real core needs that underlie those threats and underlie the positions. What are the actual concrete issues that have to get negotiated? And also the values. We listen for proposals, we listen for what the intentions are. There are a range of approaches to mediation, from evaluative, where contrary to what we just told you mediators do, some mediators, I think particularly former judges and some lawyer mediators will come in and they'll figure out what's wrong and try to fix it and try to sell the parties and tell the parties this is what we want to do. We're pretty far at the other end of the spectrum. We really see ourselves as facilitators. Our job is to help the people at the table make the deal, come up with options. We try to ask the kind of questions that help people evaluate options, we may, if the parties are willing, express opinions, but we don't come up with a solution. We don't tell people what to do. You'll often hear people use mediation and arbitration interchangeably. Arbitration is a process like private judgment. Instead of hiring an arbitrator, instead of a court holy process, arbitration is private, but it's still like going to court. There's still a third person or sometimes three-four people who listen to both sides and make a decision. We as mediators don't make decisions. We try to get all the information out so that people are making informed choices. In the end, we go back to our lives, and people at the table either have a choice to work things out, more gratifying to us if we can help people work things out, or they can go back to whatever the mess was that got them at the table to begin with. I think we're going to go through the things that a neutral third party can do, look at that, and as we're setting up the vote, what we're going to do, and look for what techniques you see being used by how you choose mediation. The description of the stages of mediation are pretty linear. Starting with the assessment, preparation for mediation, seeing the parties when we come to mediation. In the sense of the bigger picture, that's what we're doing. We're beginning the process with you today. Then the actual beginning of the information of the mediation, the explanation of the process, gathering information, identifying the issues, interests, and feelings. You'll see all of that happen. What we're going to do is mediate a long case. It's I'm sure it's got lots of publicity, lots been written about it. We're going to need volunteers, 3 parties. This is the well-known case, the dispute between Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Okay? So, how many of you know the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears? All right, I get to read you a story. Okay? And what we need is somebody to come be Goldilocks.
This is our standard practice. We use this one.
Yeah, we use it with lawyers, law students, everybody. Can you care? All right, so I'm going to just refresh your mind, those of you who've forgotten Goldilocks, and those of you who know, I'm going to read you the story of Goldilocks. It's actually interesting. I want to know how to get this. There are so many versions of Goldilocks. So you could write a whole essay on how a story gets told and retold. modern versions, I think, don't have the power, of course. The old version. But the old version is once upon a time there was a little girl named Goldilocks. She went for a walk in the forest, and pretty soon she came upon a house. She knocked, and when no one answered, she walked right in. Now, actually, I had this story, the fact that our Goldilocks had told her, don't go into the forest by her mother, and she got lost. And so when she saw this house, she was really tired when she went in. When she went in at the table, in the kitchen, there were 3 bowls of porridge, oatmeal. Goldilocks was hungry. She tasted the porridge from the first bowl. This porridge is too hot, she said. So she tasted the porridge from the second bowl. This porridge is too cold, she said. Then she tasted the last bowl of porridge. And what she said was, everyone remember, this bowl is just right, thank you. And she ate it all up. After she'd eaten the 3 bears' breakfast, she decided she was feeling a little tired. So she walked into the living room, where she saw 3 chairs. She sat in the first chair to rest her feet, and she said, this chair is too big. She sat in the second chair. This chair is too big too. So she tried the last and smallest chair. This chair is just right. But as she settled down in the little chair to rest, it broke into pieces. She was really tired by then, so she went upstairs to the bedroom. She lay down on the first bed, but it was too hard. She lay down on the second bed, and it was too soft. She lay down on the third bed, and it was just right. And so she fell asleep. When she was sleeping, the 3 bears came home. Someone's been eating my porridge, growled Papa Bear. Someone's been eating my porridge, said Mama Bear. Someone's been eating my porridge, and they ate it all up, cried Baby Bear. Someone's been sitting in my chair, growled Papa Bear. Someone's been sitting in my chair, said Mama Bear. Someone's been sitting in my chair, and they broke it all to pieces, cried the little bear. They decided to look around some more, and they got upstairs. Papa Bear growled, someone's been sleeping in my bed. Mama Bear said, someone's been sleeping in my bed too. Baby Bear said, someone's been sleeping in my bed and she's still there. Just then Goldilocks woke up. She saw the 3 bears. She screamed for help, jumped up, ran out of the room and out of the house, opened the door, ran away into the forest, and she never returned to the house with the 3 bears. Now, of course, in the modern era, what happens when this happened to Goldilocks is Papa Bear was really furious. She invaded his space, his home, where he tried to protect his family, provide for his family, and he never heard a word from Goldilocks after this incident. So you know what he did? He went to his lawyer, and they filed a lawsuit. Well, Goldilocks and her family were furious. Imagine making such a big deal over a little thing like this. So they are angry. They've been telling all their friends. All the bears' friends have heard about this, so it's starting to spill over between the families. And when the case got into court, the judge said, why don't you people try mediation? So we have a well-known, experienced mediator here. Do we have a volunteer to be? Baby Bear is actually about 14. We have a baby bear. Good. Do we have a papa or mama bear? Me? Okay. So let's get to the girls. And Goldilocks. Goldilocks? Great, thank you. Thanks. So let's pull some chairs up here. And what we're going to do, can we get a couple more chairs? Somebody sacrifice chairs for the...
I can take it. I can hear you.
And what I'll do is do stop action. So as we go along, at various stages, I will stop. And we can talk about what you see happening here. And raise any questions or comment on what you see happening. And at any point you do want to stop, just feel free to raise your hand and do time out. So, okay.
If you're copy of Big Bear and Goldilocks and Bathabile. If you can move forward just a little bit, we're all here. All right, so I want to start out getting to know you a little bit to make sure that when I'm talking to you, I'm using the name that you want to be called by, and you know who I am. So my name is Bathabile, and what name would you prefer I call you? Thank you. And what name would you prefer to be called by? Goldie. Goldie will be great. And you are?
We'll be able to.
Did you say Big Papa?
Yes. Big Papa?
Big
All
Papa.
right,
Yeah.
so Big Papa.
The rating Big Papa is.
Goldie.
You know Big Papa is.
Poppy? No.
Anybody know Big Papa is? No, Red Sox fans. Oh, that's a different discussion.
And well, notice that Carol and I managed to get along. Although she's a Red Sox fan and I'm not. Okay, so before we get started, I want to take a few moments to talk a bit about the mediation process, so we're all on the same page about how we do it. The first thing that I want you to know, and I want to acknowledge to everybody, is that I don't know anybody here. I'm not personally acquainted with any of the three of you, and I have no particular opinion about how this situation should be resolved. I have no stake in the outcome, so I'm impartial when it comes to the outcome. However, I want you to know that I am very concerned about the process, and my role here is to make sure that everybody has a full opportunity to speak, to feel heard, to think and make decisions about what they want to do, to come to a resolution of the situation. It's really important for you to understand that mediation is a voluntary process. So your being here is up to you. Even if the judge said that you have to come to mediation, staying in mediation is up to you. So if at any point you feel like this isn't working for you, if you're feeling pressured or for some reason it's just you don't want to be here anymore, you have a right to do that. You have a right to ask for a break. So sometimes it might be that you're just feeling tired or there's a lot of information coming at you at the same time and you just want to take a little bit of time for us to break. It could be for 15 minutes, it could be for a few hours, it could be for a couple of days. But this is a really flexible process, and so you are free to do that, to ask to come back at another point. Mediation is an opportunity for you to hear each other and then to be in the driver's seat in terms of discussing and deciding what's going to happen, what the outcome is. That's what's also really important, and it makes it very different from the more adversarial processes where you might present something to a third party and then you're at the mercy of the third party's decision making. Here, you're in the driver's seat, you make the decisions. My role is to facilitate the conversation, and that means that I help sort of be a traffic agent so that people are not talking over each other. I help to clarify perhaps if something somebody said isn't necessarily clear to everybody. But my role is just to help the conversation. Your role is to find the alternatives, to decide what kinds of options might work for you, and to come to a decision about that. Now, it's really important to understand that in this situation, the conversation that we have here is confidential. It's really important. I know that there are a lot of other people who sort of been involved. The whole community knows about this. They all know about what happened, and they all have opinions about what happened. But you being here in this room means that you're the ones who get to have the conversation, and that you get to do it outside of the purview of prying eyes. It's important to you that folks at home know what's going on and understand what's going on. Then we can talk about having a joint statement, if you like, about what happened and what the outcomes are. But when you're inside the process, it's important for you to feel free to explore, to even explore ideas that might be unpopular to other people, so that you don't feel pressure to go one way or another, the impression not to explore various options. It's really important that we remain respectful during the process, and that just helps to facilitate communication, to help us all be able to communicate. So I'm going to ask that you try not to interrupt each other, and as a matter of fact, you each have a piece of paper there, and what I ask for you to do is when you hear something that you disagree with, you know you're going to hear something you disagree with. If you didn't, you would be here in this room, right? If you all agreed about everything, you would be here. So if you hear something that you disagree with, jot down a note, and I promise you, I will come to you, and I will have an opportunity for you to address whether you agree with. But that's to help so that we're not interrupting each other. And I also ask that, I understand that you feel very passionately about what's going on, and I honor that. However, it's helpful not to, to push people out or to be, highly qualified in the process. So I'm going to ask that you also be mindful of that. Can we all agree about that? There's a part of the process I want to explain that's called caucus. And caucusing means this. Sometimes during the process, you might have a question, but you don't feel comfortable asking a question in front of everybody. Or you might have a concern about something that somebody said, but you don't want to express that in front of everybody. You might feel embarrassed or for some other reason you would like it. So you can ask for a caucus. And what that means is that I will meet privately with you, and that what you say in that process is confidential. So I will ask at the end of our conversation if there's anything that you want me to share with the rest of the group. Otherwise, I assume that you want to keep it confidential. Now, as part of my role, whatever I do for one person, I will do for the other person. So if one person asks for caucus, so actually caucus will all three, even if you didn't ask for caucus. I may get a sense that a caucus might be useful, so I can ask for caucus too. So that's what caucus is. Yes? What? No. Sorry. All right. So that's about it for my opening statement. Are there any questions that you have about the process? Sounds good. Okay. And so we just.
All right. So, question. What did you see Bathabile doing? What do you think her goals were? Then, after you talk about that, also, what questions do you have about what she just did?
Presented the mediation process. Made sure that all parties involved understood what was and explained the rules, and explained her position as a third party.
So she explained goals, expectations, the ground rules, the respect, not cursing people out. I can't remember you said trying. A lot of times when we do some of the communities, I say we try not to curse people out because New York City, the F word. I moved out to New York in the early 90s. I walked into school and I think 10 times I went to school and we might be a fight breaking out. And then I realized the F word is just a universal sentence. It's expander in New York. So we're trying to set some expectations about what's going on. And what would be helpful in the process. Anything else she did? So she got hired from the very beginning. So having said it's voluntary, it's up to you. At the end, she said, "Hey, we're going to give it a try." And a lot of times when we mediate, we say people come not really knowing who they want to court, expecting to see a judge, and they come to a community center because they're going to fight with their neighbor, and somebody says try mediation, and they don't know what's going on because you're getting shuffled around again. And so it's really important that before you start the process, people have a sense, an explanation of the process, and a chance to choose to try it on. She also, the introductions, from the very beginning, reinforcing the you, your patrol, what do you want to be called? it's a way we like to start by just saying, this really is your process, and you tell us. And again, sometimes we'll vary that. If you're dealing with somebody, culture where age is respected, and one person is older, and the other person might just go with the but it's kind of a, again, from the very beginning, underlying it is your process.
We take that very, very seriously. I have mediated and don't. So, if the person feels that they don't want to use any particular name, we're really serious about this autonomy.
And the impartiality is kind of stressing, I don't know you. Sometimes you know people. Sometimes if you get hired to be a mediator, or you work in a particular setting where there are so many people there, you just, again, want to be transparent. All right, I haven't met any of you, or, Armando, we met before in a previous case, but we've had another relationship. Sorry, and now I'm probably kicking part of that from my mouth. It's just all my face. Okay. But yeah, just be very transparent about what kind of content we've had before. And the impartiality, sometimes mediators will say, I'm impartial. That means, how we said, no mistake in the outcome. But unfortunately, we need. I'm on both your sides. I'm here to help both of you. And finally, the confidentiality. Sometimes, in some settings, we'll talk about exceptions. Kind of just for your information. The two general exceptions when you're working in community cases or family cases, child abuse report, and once I mediated a case where parties were threatening each other. One person was saying, I could beat him up, I could back the country right now, I could sell him right now, and I've seen that when I say, great, he's in the process of verbalizing his concerns, this isn't this great, and he gets he slugs a guy, and the police came. So ever since that, I always include any serious violence with threat of violence, it is an exception to confidentiality. But again, as Malcolm said, the fact that we see a lot of lawyers posture, and we see a lot of people in litigation is kind of a performance, and that performance is not always useful. It's good for winning and losing, but it's not necessarily good for getting evidence. And so that confidentiality lets people be there and also take risks and brainstorm and talk about options without having to come back to bite them. So what's actually said in the mediation can't be used in any future proceeding, court proceeding, whatever. And we actually have people remember that today, but people actually sign an agreement. The written agreement goes over these kind of ground rules and reiterates the confidentiality.
Carol, there is one thing that I forgot to mention as well, which is that along with confidentiality for the people who are participants, confidentiality on the mediators is really honored. To the extent that if there were litigation, we ask our participants to promise not to call us as witnesses, and we would not be witnesses for anybody in the court case. And so, even if we were called, then we would decline to testify.
Have you ever mediated a case that wasn't confidential? Like ever taken up a mediation that was not?
No. Right, yeah. I'll talk about ways in which we had to work with situations that were not conventional mediation, which was that we had a large group of people who wanted mediation. Mediating with a large group can be really difficult because it's hard to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak and is heard. So we asked them to make it a smaller group than everybody, the participants who were involved in international mediation were then kept abreast of this mediation by agreement on the part of the parties. So, we can sort of work with it, but just, our experience has shown that in the beginning, people may want to say everybody on board, but when we really get down into it, it's really helpful if you're able to just focus on being there at the table without being concerned about, well, if I say this, what is everybody else going to do? if I make that suggestion, or if I hypothetically agree to something, or people who are watching will think that I'm selling out. So it's really important that you don't have that pressure and be able to freely explore the many options and go home to make a decision. So at this point in the mediation, I'm going to ask, but before I do that, how are we on time?
We started, what's your time? We started about 15 minutes late.
We're here all summer. What time is it?
It's 5. I got us 3 hours. So we got 10 more hours. We got, you have, go ahead.
Okay. So at this point of the mediation, after I've explained all of that, then I ask a question that seems something obvious to some folks, but it's interesting the answers that come back. I ask this question: what brings you here today? Oh, before I do that, sorry, we have to decide who goes first. And so what is usual in practice is that we have the person who asked for mediation to go first. So in this case, I'm not sure who asked for mediation. Is it Goldilocks or Bathabile or maybe
Judge Sentence.
the judge sent them?
Yeah, Judge Sentence.
Papa Bear is the one who's seeing me, so
You feel okay with Bathabile going?
it seems like Papa Bear presented why I'm here.
So we'll start with where you're at. You feel good about it? Okay. So Bathabile, after that long spiel I just gave, what brings you here today?
Well, I think everybody knows the story more or less. And the big issue is I want my parents. I weigh like 800 pounds. I'm not breaking bets, I'm falling from the floor. I don't know who usually is big, just simply times. It's like that. That bed that she put was either from her, his late grandfather. That's been tested about really suicidal conditions and stuff. I mean, I think, for me, the issue is that she seems to be this girl. She was trying to do everything wrong. But I do when somebody comes into your house and creates a situation.
Is there anything else? Thank you very much. Do you mind if I come this way? So Goldilocks, what brings you here today?
Well, yes, I did something wrong, but I'm just a little girl. Little girls make mistakes. I was really hungry and really tired, and there was food and a place to sleep, and I broke a chair. It's badly made. I'm sorry, but I don't know what to do about it.
Is there anything else?
No.
Baby, what brings you here today?
It was my grandpa bear that made that chair. I can't even fit in it anymore, but every time I lift it, I think of my grandpa and how it's in pieces. So, heartbroken about my chair. And I went into Goldilocks' house. She freaked out and I'm in trouble. So there's trouble, but there's also heartbreak.
Is there anything else?
That chair makes me really happy.
Well, I'm going to take a moment to summarize what I've heard from all of you in your introductions. I hear that you're Big Papa, and that you both come in with a sense of some bewilderment as to what happened here. it's a sense of feeling violated and disrespected. And, that what happened is really unfair. You mentioned, what if the tables were reversed? What would have happened in that situation? And I heard you talk about the chair and how important the chair is, and especially when the students make and it's a reminder of him to you. And so you said that you felt heartbroken. You didn't really sing the chair was broken. Goldie, I hear you saying that you're sort of at a loss for what to do. You were in a tight spot, and that you didn't intend any harm by going in with it. You were trying to care for yourself in that situation. And I kind of got the sense, and I might be wrong about this, and have you correct me, but I kind of got the sense that you feel a little bit persecuted in the sense that you're being pursued for something that you really didn't have full control over, in the sense that you have some responsibility. So this is sort of what I'm hearing and what's coming through from you. So if you don't mind, if you agree, I'd like to take a moment to talk a little bit more about what I heard from you.
Reactions? What you see happening? Questions about how we was doing here? I have a question about whether Bathabile was trying to take the extremes of both of the positions as presented and bring them a little bit closer together. Like, I thought she undervalued the loss of the chair, that she talked about its meaning, but she never really said, hey, at the end of the day, this chair is destroyed. So there's an irreplaceable thing that's been destroyed. And that, sorry. Yeah. So I think that was dumping. And I thought, it's like only lost side maybe. You used the word that you're being kind of pursued or persecuted, and I thought that was way too strong for, I mean, Goldilocks was really just saying kind of, I mean, like, whatever. Like, I'm a kid, and I stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time, and I don't really know how to get out of it. So,
Let's ask, before we all the responses,
yeah.
let's ask the parties. How did you react to the summer? Hold on a second, sir. Did you think that captured it, or did it surprise you?
I mean, yeah, it felt maybe a little bit stronger than I was specifically trying to feel or something, but I mean, ultimately, I think the perspective is like I made a mistake, and I'm here because somebody told me to be here, but I also want to resolve this. So, it does feel like a real affront on a little girl's mistake to sue her and take her to mediation. But,
So one of the things that we do listen for as mediators is a way to capture using some different words. But kind of capture the essence, but do it as, you said, again, you did it as questions, that right? So it also leads the way, as people say, no, that's, I'm not, how about how did you feel? What's your reaction?
I didn't know that baby was really like her chair. But I was also kind of surprised by Goldilocks to hear that it was kind of like, well, I'm just a little girl, and granted, that's fine. But then it's kind of just like, well, so I guess. And I think that when we're here right now, we all feel what we feel, I guess, but it was kind of shocking to hear that it wasn't, she wasn't really taking responsibility and just saying, it was wrong, and how can I help fix things? It was kind of just like, well,
And we're about 5 minutes into mediation here, and it's not at all unusual that people are pretty positional and not taking ownership early on. And so I think it's, we're trying to capture accurately what the parties have said, but also trying to frame it through different words and take advantage of the fact that we're neutrals and might see things in a slightly different way than hear each other, but always giving room to correct.
And sometimes in practice, what'll happen is that I'm guessing. So especially at the very beginning, I really don't have a sense of the parties. And so there is sort of a process of exploration, kind of feeling my way along. And so that's why I will ask, am I on the right track here? Does it sound right at all? There was something that Goldie said that triggered that for me, that it wasn't as important to her as it sounded to me. So that's one of the ways of finding out. And one of the really great things about the process, which I really appreciate, is getting feedback from the parties about what they're saying. To have them say, you're totally off track. Because if you don't say that, I'm going to continue down that track. And Lord knows where we might end up. And so it is really helpful to hear this, that, well, you know what, I think that you really didn't take seriously enough, or didn't express seriously enough how hurt I am over losing that chair, that my grandfather knew. I'm feeling like it's being undervalued. That's great. It's excellent. That's an indication for me that, I really need to take that a little bit more seriously. I didn't perceive it was
Baby, did you feel hurt?
I mean, nothing can ever replace that chair.
And remember, your question was, the chair was destroyed and it wasn't acknowledged. We don't know that yet. Right? So one of the things when Tommy moves on to the clarifying stage, which is what we're doing next, she's going to ask, tell me about the chair. So this is opening statements by the parties, and then clarifying, and then it's all starting up.
So what happens next is that I continue sort of in the order. And for the first perhaps quarter of the mediation, it sort of is kind of structured down. It's a very structured kind of conversation. So I'll come back to Papa Bear and say, tell me more about what you said about something. And then I'll ask Goldie, tell me more about this. And then I would come to Baby Bear and say, tell me more about what you told me about the chair. And so then there's an opportunity to have that clarified, and you can say to me, I'm just devastated about the chair and so forth. So there are these layers of conversation. I see mediation as sort of a spiral rather than a circle, because it does move. It moves in a linear fashion, but it also moves, we can come back to things and come back to things and come back to things. Until everybody reaches a point where they feel that they've thoroughly expressed themselves, thoroughly been acknowledged. And then there comes a point in the conversation where people start talking to each other. And there's a sort of transition that happens. And it's really fluid and organic. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to happen, but it does. And so that's how the process is going.
Well, I'm just wondering in terms of maybe that's what will happen next. But when you're why did you come here today? And everybody kind of seemed to agree that the same thing happened. And it's just their opinion on the matter, but does it ever happen that the parties vastly different things happen? I don't know. That seems like that would be far more complicated.
I remember a mediation where some of the facts hinged on the presence or non-presence of the bucket. Was the bucket there? And from my perspective as a practitioner, part of my role is that the bucket being there or not being there didn't really matter. So it's not about who's telling the truth, and I'm going to decide who's the more trustworthy person, whose word can I take. The actual issue was over something completely different. It was over respect. Words that had been spoken to each other, and how the person had been treated, and how they had treated each other.
But what about when the issue actually does hinge on that?
see about at least 2 or 3 times a semester, when I'm supervising students, you see them in mediations, walking out, having had parties reach an agreement, and reasonably happy with the agreement, but not agreeing on the facts. And I was like, I don't have a clue what happened. I have not a clue. The figuring out what happened in the past, that's what I was litigation. Litigation is exactly the thing. Mediation is okay, it's important for us to understand what the disagreements are, but mediation goes forward. So if you disagree about these things, but you're concerned about this, you're concerned about this, let's see what we can do going forward. What's essential is to agree. So if one person feels that what's the most important to him or her is that we call you're right and you're wrong. Mediation is not right. Maybe we would recognize that sooner or later and say it sounds like we really need to go up. That's fine. Sometimes people need that.
This might be a good time. This might be a good time to bring forward that understanding about what success is in mediation. I think that's something that people often ask me. It's when do you know that you've been successful in mediation? And the expected answer, I guess, is that everybody skips through the days of holding hands. I think that we all love each other. And for me, it's not so. Carol, of course, will speak for herself. But for me, a mediation is successful if the process was done well. If everybody felt that they had a chance to speak, to be heard, to be acknowledged, and even if at the end of all of that they decide, you know what, no, this is not satisfying to me, I want to do something different. That doesn't mean that the mediation didn't work. It is absolutely open for folks to agree to disagree. Agree to disagree is one of the outcomes that happens sometimes in mediation.
Our experience with both of us is you never know until you get into the process. Some of the cases that at the beginning when I heard about Fairmount, I said, we'll go through the motions, but we're going to be out of here in an hour or two because this is going to go nowhere. It worked out, sometimes quickly, sometimes over time. Others, when I heard at the beginning and thought this is a piece of cake, I've seen this kind of case before, and nothing happens for a couple of hours until you wrap it up and send it back to her. It's hard to pick them up. It's a way that your alternatives are, without that, work out. But I think there are mediators, on the evaluation side, there are mediators who, websites, 95% settlement rate. I always tell people, if you ever see that, run the other way. Because I don't know what they're doing, but they're not mediating. But there are a lot of cases which do so. But you never know. Until you get into at the bargaining table, in that kind of safe space, in fact, what we're really trying to do is create a safe space for people to really think hard and pursue and be creative about ways of fight solving the problem. It doesn't always work.
Mediation is an opportunity, not a mandate.
Oh yeah. Well, I just had questions about when it seems like mediation is really different, sort of something like negotiation or more about outcome. But even with that communication, there's an existing asymmetry sometimes of information and knowledge, and so in a sense, a certain party could be disadvantaged by leveling out the understanding. The weaker, sometimes a weaker party, in a way, someone that has less say or less standing to make decisions. If that's the party being approached for mediation, it's actually weakening their position, or to create that clarity, because I feel it has personally been a strength for me to not have to operate outside of those lines. Sort of in opposition to someone that's a little more all-knowing and all-powerful. So I'm just curious about mediation trying to level between parties that are inherently before and after?
That's a great question. Ms. Johnson, do you want to go first? I wasn't punting. Let's see here. So I have a lot of thoughts on that, and they're not necessarily going to come in any particular order. So I'm sort of thinking out loud here. One of the core understandings of mediation is the power of information. That information is power, and the way that it empowers is to allow people who are participating to make informed decisions. It also allows people to clear up some of the misconceptions and the unknowns that create fear. So one of the greatest contributors to conflict is fear, and a lot of times that fear comes out of what you don't know. So when you're going into a mediation or a negotiation, for example, you walk into the room, you're sitting across the table from this other person. There is this darkness that is involved in there, where you don't know necessarily what's going on in your head. You don't know necessarily what price are they absolutely bottom out at, whether they will this and that. You don't know, there's a lot of stuff that you don't know. And often that is the greatest source of anxiety for people when they're coming into a negotiation or a mediation. You don't know what's going on. I tell I do workshops as well and teach, and I tell my participants that sense, that feeling I'm going is a marvelous gift. It's an awesome gift if you pay attention to it, because then it tells you what questions to ask. You want to clear that up. I don't know if any of you are, if you remember or have ever seen the Blair Witch Project, right? Why did that movie work? Like one of the big things they talk about with it is that it had no budget for special effects and that sort of thing. You think of your typical scary Halloween movie, there's millions of dollars of special effects involved, and things are flying around in the air and all this kind of thing. The Blair Witch Project had no budget, but it worked. It still is one of people tell me that they were scared witless. Why were people so scared? What did you see? Pardon? It was raw.
I actually ever see it.
Yeah. Did you ever see the thing? No. You couldn't see it. And that was genius, because there is no monster as terrifying as the monster you can make up in your own head. I can create a monster, CGI, the whole thing, that is a monster that's scary to me, and you can look at it and be like, oh, that's funny. But if I let you create the monster yourself, wow, that's power. And so one of the things that can happen then, I encourage my students, is to take that moment, that feeling, apprehension, and say, wait, I need to ask questions about this right here. And so that opportunity to communicate then is an opportunity for empowerment, where you can start to ask those questions that people often think you're not supposed to ask. But you get out there and ask those questions and see what answers you get. And that allows you to perhaps feel a little bit less, having that information is asymmetry that can contribute to feeling really empowered.
I guess I just wonder about mediation as this kind of island where I've asked a lot of really hard questions and the answer that I've gotten is no. Or you can't know that, that's the way it works. And so my fear is that those questions only get answered in your mediator, which isn't a structural solution. It's not functional to create this little island of good communication when realistically I don't want to create a monster, I just actually want answers. And I feel like potentially a process like this could give that clarity, but it doesn't seem to be a long term.
I see what you're saying. So for the moment, as we're mediating, people make a candidate and so forth, but after the mediators leave, there's concern about what happens after that.
Well, not only that, but the society reads certain things that are said, are on one party server, in other words, the way that culture, American culture, facts and not give credence to, say, emotional facts. That's something that mediation cannot actually mediate. It's about culture.
I have a big sign in my office that says feelings are facts. And feelings are one of the things that I think, when I do a summary, the outline I have in my head is feelings, interest, issues. So the actual things that need to be bargained about, the issues, come last of the things that what I'm listening to. But you know, that list of what we need to support the values, if you have real value differences, you have core values, people aren't going to meet you about that. On the other hand, one of the most famous examples, or most moving examples that I know of mediation, took place in Boston some years ago. There was a murder at an abortion clinic. And going out of that, a group of pro-life women, including some Catholic nuns and other people in the pro-life movement, sat down with pro-choice women. And they weren't going to change each other's views about the core values, but they agreed that there were ways to disagree and continue the debate that were not destructive of one another, but they were overcome. So that's not going to change. You're really about, I mean, I think what we've done in terms of the, you can't know that. Or you know it now, but then we go back to the same old. That sounds to me like an issue we have to talk about. There's a real interest in transparency and access to information and making good decisions that are all things that I heard that we question. When you get people committed to trying mediation, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Certainly with the intentions frustrated with your packet. I can understand you're being skeptical and pessimistic. And you're actually, I heard your question raising two different questions. One is, if we go to the table, is that somehow going to be perceived as arguing on our values and principles, just by showing the table? And that is a very common question about mediation. And I think the thing that our answer to that is we can lead with this work. Trying. But I think our job as a mediator is also to be sure to remember those core principles, informed decision making. Our job is to level the playing field, be sure that people who would normally have as much voice as others get a voice. I used to do parent child cases, kids cases, so kids who were cases brought by parents to school against kids who were screwing around either figuratively or awfully little. And the parents would come in and say, I'm on this process, you're on the kids' side, but suddenly the kids would give a voice. And then at the end they say, I started off thinking you were on their side, and now I see there's a chance for everybody. But we also have an ethical obligation. If the process is being abused, or if we find out that somebody, some participants don't have adequate information, don't have adequate emotional ability, certainly we have an obligation to say this is the right mediation. An example of that is that the vast majority of mediators will not mediate if their allegations of abuse, because the kind of the danger and the power balance is so great that it's not safe. A safe situation.
Yeah, I think another part of Casey's question, or maybe a question in addition to that, is rather than on this issue of the asymmetry of information, you sort of just brought this up, the imbalance of power, of like legally recognized power between the two parties, which I think is a really complicated issue. I don't know how to think about that.
So,
Well, maybe we should keep the discussion going rather than going back.
yeah, so a couple of things.
think what you see happen is the Bathabile will say, tell me about the chair. You said you were walking in the woods and you were tired. Tell me more about that. So you would get the stories fleshed out. And by, getting more information that might build some understanding, might be ability, you didn't be able to own what you did. Do a lot of summarizing. Eventually, you never identify the issues. So there's an issue about the chair, there's an issue about the space that will go up. What are your thoughts about it? What are the, how do you see the, what are your reactions to those proposals? And you value proposals. If something comes to mind, the mediator always brought up, like I said, that sometimes people listen to you when you're expert. So this one is probably something basic. I would say 2.5, 3 hours.
That's another thing to understand. We were 5 minutes into it. A mediation like this, as Carol said, I would peg it at about 2.5 hours. And I would know a little bit better about 15 minutes in. So there's this moment, and once you've been doing mediation for a while, you can start to get a sense of where things are going to go. But it takes about 15 minutes in to get things. So that's about a little bit more into the process. But I did want to also say, Casey, I responded to your question hoping that I was in the ballpark, but still wasn't sure that I understood your question. So did my answer address any of what you were asking about?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't understand how sort of non-trivial mediation is, and like you can go in and out of it at this time. But I think which we all know that, people, you're not walking into it is all some of my question. But like my other questions are kind of like branched off of that, or about who calls for the mediation. And also like who pays for it, like in relation to the ideas that Casey would be and like legal information and also literally who pays for it, I think, and how much it costs. I have no idea.
So let me come to that, but I also want to back over to Jenny. So Jenny said I'm going to come back to Terry. So Jenny, you were asking about legal status and about legally recognized power and so forth. I mediate at the CCRB. Are you all familiar with the CCRB? The CCRB is an independent, quasi-governmental, yes?
It's just an agency set up to using force as a language, force as a language, disrespect, and basically something else.
By the police. So if you've been harassed by the police, you can file a complaint with the CCRB. The CCRB investigates and then decide how to take action. Sometimes the investigation goes to adjudication. Sometimes the investigation goes, the case goes to mediation. They have a very strict criteria for when they feel that a case is appropriate for mediation. And so I'm on the roster of mediators. So if you can imagine, when we come into the room, you have a civilian and then you have a police officer who has certain powers. In that room, however, we have two communities from my perspective. So I'm conducting the process of those two communities. Even if the police officer comes in uniform, and they do, they come in uniform, they have their side piece, the whole thing. But we are mediating teachers. And so there's an understanding within the context of the CCRB that that's who it is and what the roles and positions are. In this particular situation, then, there's an opportunity to have a discussion about that. Right? Who are the people who are involved in mediation? What are their roles within mediation? How are they connected to the roles outside of the mediation? What might the consequences be outside of the mediation? These are not questions that I can answer for you because they're really great questions. They need some discussion to get answers about that. But it's fantastic that they're being raised. So one of the things that we would do then is have a discussion about what are the parameters going in, and what are the potential consequences coming out. But mediation is an opportunity to bracket stuff and say, outside of this context, we have administration, and administration has its roles and powers and so forth, and we have students, and students have their roles and their powers and so forth. But when we come into the table to mediation, it's really important that the empowerment, that the empowerment be all around, that we aren't doing this imbalance thing. And as Carol mentioned, that's why you will find most mediators that I would find anyway won't do domestic violence cases where there's been domestic violence. We're very much mindful of issues of power. Actually, it is part of our role. As Carol was saying, when she mediates the PINS case with parents and children, you can imagine the power balance there, right? Massive power balance. But it is part of the role of the mediator to help level the playing field in that situation.
I'm going to answer two very concrete questions. You got a very philosophical answer, but you said who calls for the mediation?
We're going to get to that.
So in this situation, what happened here is what happens anytime any professional mediator mediates outside of the court context with the court, which is actually not you know, so 2 or 3 different people, including people in the mediation community, saying there's a situation that where the administration may be interested in mediation, trying to help. And I had some history of a Columbia case with some of you may have read the article, and a couple of other academic conflicts on scale. And so I said, sure, I'm going to talk about it. I came down and spoke to the president and a couple of people in the administration. And I actually proposed at that point that probably co-mediate with me because I find I prefer co-mediation. Partly because I co-mediation, partly because I just, I get tired. It's good to have somebody else there. And you hear different things. So just two perspectives. We did long ago. We did a case together after having graduated with experience. So it's a lot of years since then, but I thought we'd be a good team. And at that point, we indicated that we wanted to talk to stakeholders. So Charlie and I came down and met with the deans and said that whether mediation goes forward or not depends on all the stakeholders saying they want to give it a try. And so we asked to be introduced to talk to you about the process and see if give you a chance to think about whether it makes sense to do it or try to. Your choice. In terms of paying, depends on the situation. I'm sure that if you wanted to share that please, and that's fine. In this situation, it would probably be opposite way. In other situations, mediators sometimes say, well, both sides, we just make me something. In this situation, I'm going to do it pro bono. I have a full-time salary, but I do mediate. I care about academic institutions. I'd want to do pro bono mediating and doing some litigation case where I hate to litigate. That's what's all. Probably doesn't have a full-time salary, so she's going to be charging. I guess what happened.
And that, yes. So the administration is paying. Now that is also a situation that is, I run into commonly because when I'm at the CCRB is paying. And so often people who are coming in, both the police officers and the civilians who are coming in are like, well, you're on the payroll of the CCRB, how can I trust that you're going to deliver a service that isn't on one side or the other? In the case of the CCRB, it's a little easier to answer that question because both of the people at the table are not served necessarily by the CCRB. They're not stakeholders in the CCRB, so it's a little bit more of a distancing hands-off. although I can understand from a police officer standpoint, they may think that there's a bias toward the civilian because the police officers don't have a choice about coming in, called in there, they have to be there. The civilians, the one who asked for mediation. So in a sense, the CCRB acts at the behest of the civilian in bringing in the officers. So there's that's kind of involved in it. In this particular situation, it is quite natural for you to have concerns that because the administration is paying the fees, then that I would have reason to be biased. One of the things I had to have take, what's the word? Fidelity. One of the things that I have to take fidelity to is that my role is not about money. I have a philosophical meaning. Hear me, I have a philosophical meaning. I have a philosophical philosophical fidelity. This is administration. This is a calling. And if I could do it without asking for money, I would. Unfortunately, my roommate takes cash. And so that's just the reality of the thing. The truth of the matter is that the hours that I spend here mean that those are hours that can't be outside of someplace else actually earning cash. And so, I do have to be paid. On the other hand, there are a lot of reasons why it would be to my benefit to do things that are not according to the role. With mediators, the longer the mediation goes, the money you make. Except that it would be highly unethical for me to do that. And ethics are really important to me. Having fidelity in the world is really important to me. I can say these things to you, the only way that you'd be able to really test them out, of course, is in practice. And so I'm being totally transparent with you about that. Yes, I am being paid, the administration is doing that. However, it is in your hands to decide whether the service that you provided works for you, how long you need for it to take, and whether you decide that you want to finish it. Yes, it's 4 o'clock. So I don't know. That's
literally what I'm doing for things.
I recognize it, because I'm hearing this in my own head, and with the one hand trying to answer all the questions that might be there in your head in a short period of time. On the other hand, I'm concerned that I might not be doing it in the most artful way. So I'm more interested in hearing what kinds of questions you might have now. Well, one of the things that we did do when we discussed payment with the administration, because I was concerned about it, was to try to make it as indirect as possible. So the person who's going to be handling my billing is not somebody who's going to be involved in the relationship. So we did try in that sense to do it.
Can I just put it on our time so people can ask questions?
Do you mind if we finish the? Yeah. Okay, a few questions and then.
For me personally, I'm not worried about, I'm not concerned that either of you two are personally biased. I'm more on this same issue. I'm more worried about how can the initiated mediation affect the result of it? And how can the party that called for mediation affect the way that mediation happens? I don't know, maybe. It also doesn't seem clear to me if they asked you or if you proposed it to them.
No, they were asking around. I don't know who they talked to. They talked to some people. They had the end of mediation and started asking around about mediation.
So they came to you directly, but it was there.
Yeah. Okay. There are mediators who might pick up the phone. I sometimes have thought about picking up the phone and saying, "Can I help?" But in this situation, there was 6 minutes. I mean, what we're really doing, if you guys have decided that you wanted to see whether somebody can talk to you about mediation, they would come talk to you, we would talk to you. If we decided to go, we would have done exactly the same thing in reverse, and we would have gone to the administration and said, what do you prefer to be called, by the way? Demonstrators? Occupiers? Students? Good, students, right? Yeah, the students have asked, they've indicated willing to mediate, and we've gone through the same riff as we did with SEF the first time, kind of went through that initial process. He didn't have the benefit of the dramatic presentation with all of us, unfortunately. And so we were just on the reverse engineering. One of the administrations, the students are interested in mediation, proposed mediation, the processes, your choice, we can help, but maybe not.
This is a hard situation. It's not a very hard situation. It's not
So no guarantees that we think mediation is magical or not. Conditions, we don't know, we won't know until we get
I guess, another question that I kind of working on, like, I feel like before even thinking about moving forward is that I think that, like, it seems to me like we don't exist in this, like, paradigm of, like, representation and then, like, hierarchical leadership, and so I'm really confused about how mediation can work in that situation, because I'm also not clear on who the person on the other side is. For example, like, we've actually only heard from the president once in the past 4 weeks. So really our contacts are people like deans or DC who we probably met, like, so it's not clear who has power, who is represented, and for us, I don't think it doesn't seem to me like we could feel, like, I wouldn't feel good about us making our group smaller.
I think the short answer about what happened in the public situation wasn't exactly analogous, but somewhat analogous. And then we met, like, your experience. This was in the mid-90s, and students have been advocating the establishment of a department of ethnic studies, that is the study of African American, Latino, Native American, and Native in the U.S. And they wanted a department. There are 2 students who went on strike for 2 weeks. The students have taken over a building, the police unit hall, and they took over another building, and the main classroom building, and continue to the administration has to be meeting. So, in that situation, I didn't know how the students pick the leaders. There were 6 students who were on the table. And when we came up with proposals, they would go back and talk to the whole group of in the town hall. And sometimes we went with them more often, they went back to themselves.
Did the students ever change? It was always the same 6.
And I think it does, I think you need to have on top of it. Because the process is kind of building and changing. And university became different, some administrators, and they would go back and talk to the president and proposals and kind of.
So each party chose the groups who would come forward. Were there any requests in terms of, like, the administrators wishing to see a certain student there because they had been really vocal, or students identifying a certain administrator who?
No, I think that's part of it. The parties can make good choices. They can be good choices or bad choices. Picking the team. So we worked out there, worked with some challenges. I would say that in that case, the people at the table reached some consensus a couple of times, and both sides. I think there were moments when we thought we had a deal on one side or another, rejected it. Okay. So that's what you're talking about, having representatives at the table, but having their
What was the resolution? What was the resolution?
But there was no department of ethnic studies. There were actually nobody read our they created a center of ethnic studies, and I think there was 1 tenure track faculty position and 2 non-tenure track faculty positions.
But I got kind of heard that sort of from then basically it seemed like a cleaner to reach, but at the end of the day, they're like, we don't actually have the authority to make this change. So I mean, I like the clarity, and I'm wary of it.
So who is at the table, who actually gets to be at the table, whoever actually arrives, ends up at the table, is really important, and having decision makers there, you know, I understand the importance of that, but you don't want to go through this entire process and then find that there's no agreement, there's no ability
So that, I think that's it's kind of complex situation on both sides. Like, if 2 or 3 or 4 of you come to the table and decide something makes sense, but you go back to your team and can't sell it, the deal doesn't go forward. If the university comes, I think one of the things we do in this is not put together a whole package and then take it back. But if something starts to make sense, we can take a break and say, you need to go talk to your team before we get people committed to this. So that you don't have people feeling betrayed. Have you feel betrayed, you showed up feeling broken down. You just don't know. I mean, I hear the doubt and the skepticism, and I think it was well placed in the meeting how hard this is. I mean, you don't know until you.
I also heard a question about not knowing who's on the team now. And so that, you know, I'm wondering whether that might inform how you feel about going forward.
I think it would definitely be good to know who's on the side and then how much it's costing. But also, like, I think I will not be able to like personally reconcile the idea of like closing off the fluidity of the way we operate. Like, because like the reality of what this has been is that you don't have the same 6 people here every day. And different people are about to none, students are graduating, incoming students are probably going to become part of it. So it's it would feel very extreme, I think, to and like this is a situation that feels like that we've been able to carve out where we can break out of the need for representation in official channels and in a lot of other places.
So maybe.
Well, maybe my grandson's lunch birthday. I love getting to know you guys, but nothing is going to keep me here more than 3 more minutes. I think we have to put that we have an issue, which is I think you saw our availability of, and we have set aside all of next Monday and all of next Tuesday with very much time over this past weekend. As of next Wednesday. I become unavailable for a week or 2, and much less available. So there is a little bit of time pressure. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality of what's going on. So it would be helpful for you to reach a decision sooner rather than later. If you decide to give it a try, we'd love to be able to start on Thursday and begin that Thursday afternoon. This is the presentation, so we'll wait to start on Thursday, Friday morning maybe, and give it a shot on Monday, Tuesday.
Start the actual mediation Thursday?
But unfortunately, what we're up against is like, it's high. It's just and that's, you know, people who are just scheduled.
And then we can see, you know, I don't want to make any promises, but I hear your question about who is going to be there and so forth, so we can see if we can get clarity on that, and if that's helpful to you, to get answers to those questions. I'm just here for a few more things, our presentation.
So I have also a question, more of like a comment in this, that like maybe going forward for the future, whether it's this group or another group. I wonder if either of you feel that given the mediation form of caucuses that we just heard, you feel like you embody a little bit of a one-sidedness by being introduced to the administration and not having reached out to us before this point when we're very easily contacted. And so now it does we're having to go through these questions because it's coming at us from the side as opposed to.
We actually talked about that.
Yeah,
I'm all about
copying in and it's felt a little rude not to
Right.
actually be introduced.
So when we first, when Carol and I first both together met with the deans, that came up. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the things that we were very concerned about, is how it would look to you for us to have met with them and then come to you because of the power situation.
Or met multiple times. I understand obviously there is going to be some sort of first interaction to get that, but it seems as though in order to embody some sort of impartialness, which for me is already like a difficult concept as I get it, it seems as though if you're trying to come and you met with them once or twice or three times, there was a lot of opportunity to come to the table and just even introduce yourself already as impartial, or just say we're meeting with the administration, but we're interested with these personal reasons in your case, because I don't doubt either of your personal investment in like this type of work. Like it's not about that, it's more about like just how it's hard. I think it would be difficult for you to prove that like the mediation, like you say, as an island begins this process of like equalness, but having to be let into it that is unequal.
So let me clarify.
So it means it's not like we can look for personal lawsuit and we made a judgment call, maybe it was wrong with the view.
Yeah, I'm just reading it up. That's
Yeah,
not
we
really
didn't want to come over and catch you by surprise. I thought about coming over the first day, and then after we came back, because I wanted to introduce Tommy before we got an agreement from one side or the other. It seemed more blunt to let me know we existed and wanted to come. So you can check us out. Sounds like we can go call, and then you won't be if you work with us, you won't be the only one call. Feedback is good.
There's the fact that we agree to invite you to present about mediation for the regular hearing, so it's scheduled Thursday or whatever.
Oh, so
I
it
already
hasn't.
feel pressured to like do something, so I don't like the actual the way we do the dynamic today. I already feel pressured to do certain things. And so I'm not, I can't speak for everyone else here, but I wouldn't be interested in mediation at all.
To sort of to back up, in terms of the number of meetings that have been had, for me, because of when I came into the process, I've met once with the deans, I've met once with the president, and now meeting once with you.
Thank you.
Can I just say thank you? I appreciate your. Until we got to this end part, it was really fun working with you. And I appreciate you guys' really good questions. And obviously, we would like a chance to try to help, but we also respect your choices if you decide to go another way.
Thank you.
And I apologize. Anything else I blow off, but not my grandson. Bye.
And so we did struggle as Carol said, we couldn't define any purpose, but we did struggle with the idea of what does it look like for the person who is approached last, and it's always a person. If we could have met with everybody at the same time in the same room, that would have been fantastic. That was not going to happen. So what literally happened was that we were sitting there saying, how do we get to see the students? We're literally downstairs saying, are they there? We just knock on the door, how does it happen? And so there had to be a discussion about who was going to ask you whether you're okay with this and then coming up here. So as Carol said, we were actually trying to be uber respectful, and we didn't want to walk up here and be like, we're here. We wanted to give you a chance to make a decision as to whether you wanted to hear from us in the first place. And so that's part of the reason why it's taken so long for us to be here. We actually wanted to come on Sunday. We wanted to come on Thursday, actually. And so we sent out the email with the request, and we wanted to come Sunday before we sent an email. And so we were told that you were busy, that we have things that were already planned, and so Tuesday was when we were available. The reason we mentioned Thursday is because in an email we received back from you as a collective, it said that either Tuesday or Thursday might be available, which says in our minds that you may have an opening on Thursday for us to start. So that's why we proposed that, we asked whether that might work for you, because we know from the email that it was a possibility in the past, so that's why we suggesting that. As for Carol's availability, she didn't say specifically why I'm not going to try to for her privacy and say exactly why, but literally she won't be available. At that point, it's something that's been scheduled for a long time that can't be postponed, that she has to be involved in. We have talked about whether if she's not available, I could continue on my own. Mediating a group of this size does take an awful lot of energy and a lot of focus. Mediation in general for mediators. And I become utterly exhausted because it does take a lot of energy to be mindful and present with everybody. So we haven't made a decision on that and said, well, let's see how things are going. And theoretically, I'm happy to continue on my own if it comes to that. Carol has to drop out, but I would be able to do that. The time pressure comes precisely from that. Carol's not going to be available because of her personal reasons. We haven't been told that we have to finish by a specific date. It's just reality of life that it can take.
I think before I would even feel comfortable having a conversation with this group about whether or not we about going into mediation, before even having that conversation, I would want to know who the groups are that are being mediated, and who they represent. Are they acting in a representative capacity? What is their power? Because I think, for us, we've learned that, no offense, but the deans don't have decision-making power on the issues that we're really concerned about. Board of Trustees does. Yeah, I mean, he's a voting member of the board, but, so what is going to happen if it's the president, some of the VPs or one of the VPs and the DPs, and so then, what would be the point of engaging in that kind of a mediation? And then after that group is established, how can it be ensured that things that are agreed upon in mediation are followed through with? Because it seems like in situations like this, what often happens is that promises are made and then not kept by the party that calls for mediation, which seems to be more often than not the administration.
So here are a number of things. I don't know.
Can I ask a question? Would it be useful for you guys to be able to talk on your own at this point? And I don't think it doesn't matter. Sorry? No, I'm going to say that we want to be able to ask questions in a kind of way that may have to do with the interpretation that
I think it would be awesome if you work those questions.
Okay. So at this point, at this point, I don't know who those people are on the board. Your concerns are absolutely laudable because you want to be able to have decisions made and followed through. And so having the people involved in the process of making the decision, a lot of having buy-in. A lot of the reason why mediated agreements work has to do with the fact that we went through this step-by-step process of coming to an agreement. So of course you buy into it, you help keep it, rather than have it be dictated onto you by a third party. So whoever is involved in the table from the administration's perspective, it is important that they be people who will be able to carry that out. Carol and I don't have influence over who makes the So it's not that I'm keeping that from you. But your concerns, yeah. So your concerns about that is certainly something that I see particularly, and allow them to have that involvement.
And the subtle point of that is that it's been in an official communication to be made from the administration. It was reported that we had refused mediation previously, and so if
Number of places ending.
yeah, so then this is another situation where like as a mediator you can say that you have the opportunity to say this is not a process that works for us. But then there's
So you have an opportunity to say it's a process.
I think what she's saying is that.
But then so it's there's another set of pressures coming from not your side, but from the president. I don't want to call it the administration.
If you're a VC, will be slandered.
So this is where confidentiality becomes really important. And here's the thing: when it comes to whoever is involved in mediation, you are all as important as anybody else. So when we say we're going to ask you to agree to mediate, whether you decide that you want to memorialize that in writing, that's up to you. We don't dictate that, but that is an option. Whether you want to make it verbal, if everybody who's at the table promises to keep this confidential, we expect them to hear that, which includes if we all are sitting at the table and we say, we can't do this. This is just not working for us. That is confidential. That is not something that should come out in the press. It should come out in forums. That's what confidentiality means, and that's why we are so excited about confidentiality. So that you're not dealing with a situation where, well, what's the New York Times going to say? And also the problem is that
I was just going to ask how the confidential way would be. So, enforced is too strong, but what the back is.
That is a discussion that you can have. So, mediation is a process, it's not an event, and even getting to the table itself is a process. So what you're doing now is absolutely normal and expected. We want you to have these questions answered so you can feel comfortable. So one of the things that we can do is we sit down and we say, okay, so what does confidentiality mean? And how do we memorialize an agreement about confidentiality? And if you are, say, feeling that what is coming from the other side about their stance on confidentiality is not acceptable to you, then you don't need it. You don't get into the process.
I guess another just a sort of fundamental thing that I feel like would prevent me from wanting to do mediation is that I feel like the concept of shared interest is interesting, but I don't believe in the legitimacy of the people who make decisions here and their decision-making power. So that's kind of what I'm hearing from here, and I've seen this group's power to circumvent that already in a lot of ways. And so I'm not sure what the advantage is, and if this group would be leveled with someone that we've actually started to, in some ways, kind of at least be on equal with it in terms of ability to make changes with it, where previously we were completely less democrats. While it was being said, we're in a community process here. I'm not sure that I don't understand. I understand shared interest, but not in the context of a situation that has so much to do with certain people.
So let me see if I understand, because I'm hearing a couple of things out of that. One is that coming out of the process as it has been up to this point, call that, doing things the way you've done things has brought you a certain amount of power. And that it seems that from your perspective, it has the potential of getting you what you want if you continue this particular course. Am I getting that right?
But I think, well, yeah, it's not just so much about us, but the community as a whole. Like, us being here and acting and doing things, we're doing it, has allowed the time and the engagement from the helpers. So it's a matter of keeping it. If we mediate, it will disengage a lot of people. It will, then it will become about what us as a group here decide. And it's not about that. It's not about that at all.
So let me ask this. Or say, one of the things that is available, is what Carol was talking about with the Columbia situation, is that you don't have to make a decision about agreements or interests on your own if you don't want to. So you can say, the way we're going to participate in this process is that certain of us will be in the room having a discussion. We can formulate options. Options generating is really important in the mediation process. A lot of time is spent just talking about options, making options and then discussing those options. So we can do option generating and then say, okay, we're going to take a break now, and we're going to go back to our constituency, however it's constituted, and talk with them. So whether it's people who are participating by live stream, or Ustream, whether it's people on Twitter or Facebook, whether it's people who happen to be physically in the room, you can then take that opportunity to communicate with them and say, hey, these are the things that we are thinking about. These are the options that we are moving forward.
That's a representation of
So that, this is something that I also wanted to ask about them, because one of the areas of missing information for me and Carol has to do with what process works for you and how that has been. So I am curious about that, because I've heard a couple of times, I think, cases when you mentioned issues about representation processes. I've heard it something like times, so I'm interested in hearing what process you have been using and how it's working.
I guess that kind of leads back to what I was trying to get at, which is that like the conflict is not really between students, alumni, faculty, staff, random people walking down the street. It's between all those people in the administration, like several people, like probably less than 20 people on like the board, the upper leadership. And it seems like we're able to kind of not use the paradigms of representation and like fluidly communicate with each other and cycle in and out and come up with ideas about what we want the school to be. So why would we enter into a process to find shared interests initiated by someone who has not been receptive to those things and in some ways like seems to be trying to just or resolve the current situation?
The first thing that came to my mind was a question about what process you have been using to make decisions. So help me understand that. What process do you use to make decisions?
I mean, in my experience, it's not terribly informal. Like, and there are some, even yesterday we were saying there's a double-edged sword where we're not very formal about decision making, and sometimes it comes back to fight us, people are uncomfortable, but we're also really agile. So like we're not afraid to make mistakes, address them, make sure that people get heard who want to be, and those are almost like all of those characteristics are absent in the structure that I think we're like I would say it's really a structural.
So is the structure of the administration or the structure of the mediation?
I would say the structure of the administration.
But like other things that we have been doing is like there were community agreements from the beginning, and one of those is like unless you're saying something that everybody has agreed on, only use I statements. speak on behalf of yourself because it's, it becomes complicated. And then we have like this solo thing, a bunch of people around. And it's like, that's just
The decisions you have made have been all unanimous, because it's not been some dissenting minority, but some decision that favors you.
Have we ever really been
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think that it's not that we're always, it's not always a consensus from the beginning, but I think at the end, even if there are, I don't want to say dissenting opinions, because I think dissent is, can be a really skewed word, but maybe like non-consents. Yeah, non-consents. Having people that don't believe what the majority does. I think that we get to a point where we can work through the fact that we think different things, but we agree on one thing happening.
Which tends to mean like people do things in slightly different ways, but ultimately the same goal.
Right.
So it's not that everybody has to agree about the one way that things happen. If you feel really strongly about doing it a different way, you can do it that way.
I think that like ultimately it's a symmetrical problem to the notion that it might not be as productive to have people present from the party that call for litigation that can't actually do things or commit to things. In this room, it's basically like you would literally, the circle, that's it. It's just a smaller number of individuals that can make statements.
I think there's an earlier sort of like thing you said about like maybe it looks like drafting down values to like go to the table, but I think it's not. To me, it's not a. I don't know if it's adopting down values, but it's like paying like lip service or something. And the fact that those people, that structure like exists and it's okay. Like I don't. It's not something that I like acknowledge.
So that brings forth a couple of things. Initially, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, that my question would be, how would mediation not allow for the way that people make their decisions? So that's what. But then you bring up another fundamental question, which is, if you do not recognize that there's representation, if you do not recognize that the role of justice is legitimate, what does it mean to the table with them? And so that's not a question that I've answered. Ultimately, that's a question that you will answer for yourselves. I would, I think, inject into that some curiosity from my perspective, which would be then, if not them, who?
From what I know, we're having sort of, it's something we talk about a lot, so we're like targeting here is getting that down and on paper and pushing it out, and there's a ton of ideas about, if not them. So in a way, like, that's actually a really exciting question.
Yes, I have a question too, because, I'm talking to different members of this group a lot about the issue of representative decision-making versus group-level decision-making. I feel that I come out of such a strong tradition of representative decision-making, and I've been really, really, really interested in these new models where the representative process, the representative paradigm is kind of set aside and there's a different way of approaching decision-making. Can you imagine that, should there be interest in pursuing mediation, but perhaps changing its conventional structure in such a way that there could be, say, on the students' side of the table, absolutely the opportunity for those students who come to the table to change as the process moves forward. Because one of the things I was struck by, and I read Carol's piece on the work she did in Columbia, and there's this an extraordinary time commitment. That sometimes the mediation sessions go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I mean, can you imagine that it could be possible to shift the conventional structure and have different people at the table at different times?
But the mediation going on for hours and hours is actually not conventional. To me,
it's
and so it became its own convention. In my experience, mediations, are ordinarily plus fewer people. Ordinarily, it's a few hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours, and so forth. But I do have experience with recreating the conventions in a sense. So, one thing that we're trying to really to get across, and it may just be a matter of repeating it different ways until the light bulb, a light bulb goes off, is that mediation can be a highly customizable process. So my experience at Occupy Wall Street, for example, informs this, and this is one of the reasons why I asked the question, well, what process have you been using? Because there was this consensus model at Occupy, and so when I had a partner, mediation partner named Tashi. When Tashi and I would come into a group that requested mediation, we would talk first about process. And we would talk to them about what about mediation can be valuable, what about mediation has to stay with mediation work. So for example, it is really important that I'm able to dialogue with one person when they speak, because one of my roles is to do what we call reframing and paraphrasing. So if somebody says something, it can't be, on Wall Street there's a stack model where one person speaks and the next person speaks and the next person speaks and the next person speaks. Well, it wouldn't work from a mediation perspective for us to do that, because I need to follow up with the person who spoke and say, well, please tell me more about that, or explain to me a little bit, or I have questions about this, and then so we have to talk. So we found a way to meld the two, so that there was a stack, but then within the stack, I was able to dialogue with whomever I was dialoguing with. And it was a very fluid thing as we were going along. We were kind of creating it as we went along. And if something worked, we kept doing it, and if it didn't work, we changed it. So there is opportunity to be flexible. There is opportunity for the process to be malleable. It's one of the great things that differentiates it from an adversarial process, where we've got the rules of procedure, this is how it's done, and that's it. Very strict rules. With mediation, there are philosophical kind of rules in a sense. There are things about how we communicate that are important that you can't change. So for example, we can't change the impact of body language. And so we need to be able to communicate in a way that allows for body language. So I don't have to mediate with the phone, for example. I need to have a there so we can see each other. We can't change things about paraphrasing and reframing. That's really important because that allows us to get the clarity of the interests and needs and announcements. So there's certain things about the process that are essential to the process, but then there are other things about the process that tend to be structural that we can kind of mess with, but we won't necessarily know until we're in it.
I suppose it was one personal concern that I have is with the discussion involving statements that are demonstratively inaccurate or blatantly untrue that have been repeated a number of times. And my personal worry is that the process of mediation, or within the scope of the conversation, I wouldn't feel committed to being in that room if I kind of just heard all of that. But for me, the structural concern with mediation is that moreover, the two of you having heard certain things repeated, or, I mean, I think that this particular, like, I'm not speaking, I'm not between, like, the thing is that there are certain, like, I don't want to say technical details, but there's a level of specificity of the understanding of things that we things. I mean, I know you said that litigation is not history, but there are certain recent historical events that all deeply affect this, and I'm wondering if I'm wondering what happens when, you know, for example, somebody says something, and then the other person says, like, well, I've heard that 6 times, and this is why that's not, I mean, not just untrue, but like not relevant for this conversation at all. And what do you do as a mediator?
So as a mediator, first there is the iteration, right? There's the first statement that's made. And part of our role is to approach statements that are made. So tell me more about it. How did you come to understand? Where's how is your information constituted? Why is this important to you? Why is it important that you believe that it is this way? You know, so there's a series of questions that come out of that to help get not only at the information, but the interests that are underlying the information. Then, if I come and I'm coming to talk to you, and you're expressing to me that I believe that what that person is saying is being true, then we can have a conversation about why do you feel that it is untrue, why do you believe that it is untrue, what informs that, and so forth. Then I'm able to go back to the other side and say, well, I just heard from Oliver. I just heard from Oliver that there are questions about what you just said, and these are the questions that Oliver had. Tell me about what your understanding is of what Oliver has just said. And then they have an opportunity to come back and say where the nuance perhaps was, or where failure in communication was, or where this is something that was put out by a reporter, but it's not necessarily what came from us, we were misquoted, or whatever there might be that has happened to allow for there to be this disagreement about information. So part of my role is to do exactly that, is to facilitate. When I say facilitate a conversation, I don't mean people just talking past each other. I'm talking about probing.
Right. So I mean that's effectively my question, because if there's a maintained tension between two parties willing to consent, where either is trying to place a fact, there can't be agreement on what that fact is, then what do you do? I mean, you can go back and forth, but like ultimately there is the potential for situations where there is no sort of like, oh, well, let's just help because the reporter is doing this.
Right. Then it's up to the parties. They can decide how important that particular fact is to the ultimate outcome. So remember I told you about the bucket? When we walked out the door, there was not consent. I don't know whether there was a bucket there or not. I have thoughts about whether there might have been a bucket. I, in my head, actually visualized both the bucket there and the bucket up there. It's sort of like, I don't know. I don't know if the bucket was ever there. But ultimately, they came to an understanding that the way that the police officer had spoken to the civilian had been given, and that the civilian hadn't followed the directions of the police officer. And so they both acknowledged that they had contributed. Now, it's easy for me to say that now, in this moment. It took time to get there. So it took almost 3 hours of conversation to get to the point where each of them could feel a sense of goodwill to each other. Coming in from a position where they absolutely hated each other, to feel a sense of goodwill enough to each other to be able to accept an apology from the police officer, and the civilians also gave an apology as well. Apologize to each other for being very. Ultimately, the issue of the buckets remains unresolved. Now, in this situation, you have facts that cannot be unresolved if there is to be an agreement. And so that's recognized as well. We won't know until we actually get into a conversation where that might go. So right now, we could speculate until the cows come home or not, about what the outcomes are going to be, but we're not going to get a sense of it until we get into the conversations. So we're talking about having conversations with people who I've never met. I don't know, what their concerns are or how they might be prepared for the situation. I've met you now, and getting a little bit of a sense of what what concerns you. But there are questions that I can't answer for you simply because I don't know who they are.
So you're saying microscopic with the mediation process as integrity because you're primarily concerned with the process of conversation and secondarily around the whole extracting that.
So I do act as an extractor to some extent, in the sense that, have you ever been in an argument with somebody and you hear yourself and you're like, wait a minute, no, that's not what I mean. So I can help with that. It's one of the things that I help with, to help you clarify your concerns and clarify your needs and what you want. So I'm an extractor in that sense. It also is in terms of clarifying what the other person is saying, what really is going on in terms of extracting. However, the content of things is all yours and theirs. So I'm not concerned with shaping content or insisting that particular content be there. The content and the outcomes are yours. My entire commitment is to process.
So I think one thing that we probably should discuss later is our conditions on considering mediation. I don't think we make a decision until, or even think about making a decision until after we establish and then
After dinner.
until after we establish the piece of information we have to have.
Yeah, I mean, there are some basic things, like just about who's actually on the other side, and if that's a flexible group, and also if, just the cost, I think a lot of people are wondering.
I think it's important to get the cost also, because if we do want to feel that if we want to or feel that we have the capacity to take the initiative of it. I think it's an important piece of information to have.
If there is a contract, I would want to see that contract. There's a lot of people that work with the administration that can't even express what they actually think or feel because so that's an issue. And also, in terms of when mediation would be possible, it would be a matter of when we actually would see it usually. So I think at the moment,
You're absolutely right.
Because we're missing a lot of information on all these situations.
And that's really important. So in terms of who is involved, that's a question that I would certainly take back. I think we can bring that up.
I think we should talk about it.
And I want to say that too. You're not expected to make a decision right now. There's a lot of information that has been kind of given to you at this moment. And so of course we understand that you want to really process it and make a thoughtful decision about that. That was number one. In terms of the cost, there are ways to work with dealing with the cost in a way that you're comfortable. My fee is $2.25 an hour. That's my fee. I have done sliding scale in the past, so you can decide if that's something that you want to discuss. My understanding is that the school was willing to cover it. So, that's something that is also responsibility for you to think about without penalty. Because again, I don't want to work for them, and I don't work for you either, actually. I work for the process. If at any point you feel that myself or Carol is being biased in any side, one of the things that we do in mediation is ask people to let us know. Give us an opportunity to correct it. If you still feel that it's not providing the service that is necessary, then you tell us at the end of the mediation. If you are not sure about the people who are coming in from the administrative perspective, sitting at the table, you don't know, I don't know how they're going to participate in a mediation. If you sit down and you spend 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and decide that you don't feel that they're sincere, or you don't feel that continuing mediation with them is useful, you're free to stop the process as well. So again, the point is, with mediation, party autonomy is really important. Whether you start the mediation process is up to you. When you're in the mediation process, when you leave your representatives is up to you as well.
Thank you so much.
If you have a lot of questions, one of the things I wanted to ask is if people who are on live stream, if they have questions,
When was it alumni meeting call that the mediation on the end of like whatever considered the application, like which obviously brought like alumni don't see here, but there's like potentially we have media people that are
Nothing for 15 minutes?
and then kind of like the site we have like alumni.
If anyone has any questions.
So I would consider it like a
Or just that like she wants to know.
potentially
What's your name?
No, let's call her.
and potentially like students from other schools who have really said like I work here and it means a lot. It's kind of an interesting position I think for them to consider in something like mediation.
So I'd be interested in hearing how you discuss that.
Yeah.
And then, you can decide about your participation in that sense, who is actually going to participate in the alumni. But I did want to say that I can imagine after I leave, I'm going to be thinking of things that I should have said, or questions that I should have asked. You may be have the same thing. So we can leave our email addresses, and I'll leave mine. I think I have most of
Reunion SOS. Like, you guys forwarded around and lots of people are already on that. So
we don't like to have conversations via email. There's too much potential for misunderstanding and misreading, but you certainly can send us questions so that we can be prepared to answer them. And then even if you want to, you can say, we need another meeting with you to answer these questions before we decide on mediation. That's possible.
You guys I'm back in the office where we're not. It's just we're I don't really over that. If you guys don't work honestly.
Well, actually, I'd rather mediate to the administration because we're possible.
No, I agree. I understand. No, we're just understand just kind of a little association. And we're just having a live introductory meeting with whoever's available from the association tomorrow. They want to be here at 5. Hang out for a little bit, and they start at 5. Then we can like go out to drinks. But that's we should then we can like after we like introduce ourselves to each other. Like it would be great for us to have a few minutes to talk to you guys and like see what the like or I don't know, obviously it's like my agenda for my association is to like make it more active. They really sort of like engage you guys. Hopefully, I don't know how you guys are doing it, but if you guys are like boring yourselves to that, I like having like other kinds of actions, or like maybe we're just having a bit like more providing communication. So I don't know how much access to the alumni email does that really have to talk to anybody about anything. But we'd love to like have discussions and see. No,
Oh, you mean tomorrow?
tomorrow.
Yeah, so they're one of the tomorrow o'clock. Yeah, we're already on my calendar and.
No. It's going to be us and then a few people from the new, like newly elected.
People are so excited Interesting, every day. Great.
One of the reasons that inspired me, Carol talks about the ethnic studies protesting that happened in India. It happened in 1992. The year before, I was in a relationship, and I actually at my college, where we all
Yeah, this one is, I spent just really describes it. No, like, just I would have graduated.
It looks like little